The lecture hall fell silent as Professor Trell pulled up the next image on the display screen. 300 students from 40 different species stared at the grotesque sight before them. A human sat at a table, cutting into what appeared to be charred animal flesh with metal tools. "This is what they do 3 times a day," Trell said, gesturing at the image with one of his forearms. "They take dead organic matter, expose it to open flame until it undergoes chemical transformation, then tear it apart with their teeth. And they call this civilization." A nervous laugh rippled through the audience. Trell had been teaching xenobiology at Andromeda Institute for 20 years, and his lectures on human dietary habits were legendary. Students signed up months in advance just to hear his detailed breakdowns of Earth's barbaric food culture. "But Professor," a young Quillan student raised her hand, her scales shifting to a questioning purple. "Don't humans have one of the strongest immune systems in the known galaxy? Perhaps their food consumption is related to that." Trell's eye stalks swiveled toward her with what might have been pity. "An excellent question. And yes, humans do possess remarkable immune capabilities. But this is despite their dietary choices, not because of them. They survive in spite of their recklessness, not through any particular intelligence about nutrition." He changed the image to show rows of vegetables in various states of decay. Fermentation. They deliberately spoil their food and then consume it. Cheese, yogurt, pickles, alcohol. All products of controlled rot. The fact that they haven't poisoned themselves into extinction is pure evolutionary luck. The students typed furiously on their data pads. Trell's research papers on human diet were required reading in every xenobiology program across the galaxy. His work had established the scientific consensus that humans were the most nutritionally primitive species to achieve space travel. "What about variety?" another student asked. "I heard humans have thousands of different foods." "Necessity born from desperation," Trell replied. "Earth is a Class 12 death world. Extreme temperature variations, violent weather patterns, and constant geological upheaval. Humans had to consume everything that didn't immediately kill them just to survive. They call it cuisine. I call it chaos with seasoning." More laughter. Trell allowed himself a satisfied ripple of his skin. These lectures were important. With humans now part of the Galactic Council, it was crucial that other species understood the risks of adopting their practices. Already there were reports of adventurous aliens trying human food and suffering severe digestive consequences. "Their cooking process alone is absurdly dangerous," Trell continued, pulling up thermal images. "They combine ingredients that should never touch, subject them to temperatures that would sterilize medical equipment, add compounds that are literally toxic in isolation, and consider the result edible. Salt, capsaicin, alcohol, acids. They season their food with things that are classified as industrial chemicals on civilized worlds." "Professor Trell?" The voice came from the back. Dr. One, a colleague from the Cultural Studies Department, stood in the doorway. "May I observe?" Trell gestured welcome. Dr. One had always been skeptical of his work, arguing that he was too harsh on human culture. But facts were facts. The data didn't lie. "I was just explaining human thermal processing," Trell said. "The application of direct heat to organic matter, often over open flames. Cooking," Dr. One said quietly. "If you want to use their term for it, yes." Trell turned back to his students. "The worst part is that they've convinced themselves this is sophisticated. They have entire educational institutions dedicated to food preparation. They spend years learning to properly arrange dead plants and animals on plates. They write books about it. They create art from it." He pulled up an image of an elaborately plated meal from a famous Earth restaurant. "This is considered high culture among humans. Note the precision, the attention to color and texture. They apply the same creative energy to food that we apply to quantum mathematics or dimensional engineering. Perhaps that tells us something," Dr. One interjected, "about what they value." Trell's skin flickered with annoyance. "It tells us they have misplaced priorities. While we developed standardized nutrition paste that delivers optimal molecular sustenance, they were arguing about whether to put herbs or spices on their roasted animal flesh." The students laughed again, but Trell noticed a few exchanging uncertain glances. Good. Uncertainty meant they were thinking critically. That was the point of education. For your assignment, Trell said as the lecture period drew to close, I want each of you to research one human food item and catalog its nutritional deficiencies compared to standard galactic nutrition paste. We'll discuss your findings next week. The students filed out, chattering excitedly. Dr. Wen remained behind, her expression thoughtful. You're very certain about all this, she said. The data supports every conclusion I've drawn. Trell replied, organizing his notes. Have you ever actually tried human food? Trell's eye stalks recoiled. Of course not. That would be professionally irresponsible and personally dangerous. Why would I need to? The chemical analysis tells me everything I need to know. Chemistry isn't everything, Dr. Wen said softly. Sometimes experience teaches what data cannot. Before Trell could formulate a response, his communication device chimed. A message from the dean's office appeared on screen. His skin went pale as he read it. Problem? Dr. Wen asked. The Galactic Council is implementing mandatory cultural exchange programs, Trell said slowly, to improve interspecies understanding. That sounds positive. They've selected me as the xenobiology expert consultant for the Earth assignment. Trell's voice came out flat. I'm being sent to live with humans for 3 months, to observe their dietary practices firsthand. Dr. Wen's face did something that might have been a smile. How interesting. Perhaps you'll learn something new. Trell stared at the message, his mind already calculating how many cases of nutrient paste he could transport. 3 months on Earth. 3 months surrounded by their barbaric food culture. 3 months of resisting their primitive attempts to feed him charred animal flesh and spoiled vegetables. He would endure it. He would document everything. And he would return with even more evidence of human nutritional insanity that he had to. His entire career was built on it. What could possibly go wrong? The transport shuttle touched down in what the humans called Tuscany. Trell peered through the viewport at rolling green hills dotted with ancient stone buildings. Everything looked so organic, so uncontrolled. No proper geometric city planning. No standardized architecture. Just chaos growing wherever it pleased. Professor Trell, a human woman, approached as the shuttle door opened. She wore a crisp uniform with the Galactic Council insignia. I'm Officer Rita Banks. I'll be your liaison during your stay. Trell descended carefully, his 4 arms clutching 3 cases of nutrient paste and a portable sterilization unit. The air hit him first. It smelled wrong. Not the clean, filtered atmosphere of the Institute. This air was thick with scents he couldn't identify. Growing things, living things, and something else. Something cooking. Welcome to the research station, Rita said, leading him toward a restored farmhouse. We've prepared quarters for you. I think you'll find everything comfortable. I brought my own nutritional supplies, Trell said quickly. I won't require any of your local food. Of course. Rita's face remained neutral, but Trell detected something in her voice. Amusement? Whatever makes you comfortable. The farmhouse was smaller than Trell had expected. Humans apparently preferred their living spaces intimate rather than efficient. Rita showed him to a room with large windows overlooking vineyards. Grapevines, Trell realized, for making their fermented beverages. The research station is mostly autonomous, Rita explained. But we do have communal meals. You're welcome to join us, even if you're not eating. It's a good chance to observe. That would be professionally valuable, Trell agreed. Observation was the point of this assignment. After all, he just had to maintain proper scientific distance. That evening, Rita invited him to the dining area. 12 humans sat around a long wooden table, talking and laughing. They fell silent as Trell entered, eye stalks swiveling to take in the scene. Everyone, this is Professor Trell, Rita announced. He's here to study our culture. The humans greeted him warmly. Too warmly. Trell found their enthusiasm unsettling. They acted as if having an alien observer dissecting their primitive food habits was cause for celebration. Dishes began arriving. Trell watched with horrified fascination as platters of various foods were placed on the table. Long strands of some kind of wheat product covered in red sauce and green leaves. Round, flat objects with charred surfaces and melted yellow substances on top. Vegetables in colors that shouldn't exist in nature. This is bruschetta, one human said, offering a plate toward Trell. Just tomatoes, olive oil, garlic, and basil on toasted bread. Trell recoiled. I have my own nutrition. Thank you. The human shrugged and took a piece himself. The entire table began eating, passing dishes back and forth, serving each other. It was like watching a ritual. They didn't just consume nutrition. They made a ceremony of it. You take notes? Rita asked, noticing Trell's datapad. Standard observation protocol, Trell replied, recording everything. The temperature of the food, the varied textures, the way humans used primitive metal tools to cut and spear their meals, the sounds they made while chewing. What disturbed them most was their faces. They looked happy. Content. Some even closed their eyes briefly while eating, as if experiencing something profound. This couldn't be just about nutrition. There was something else happening here, something his research hadn't captured. How was your trip? An older human asked Trell. Efficient. Standard council transport. Trell replied, not looking up from his notes. Food must have been terrible, though, the human continued. Those Nutri-Packs they serve on long flights taste like recycled cardboard. Several humans laughed in agreement. Trell's eye stalks swiveled up. Nutrition paste is scientifically formulated for optimal molecular delivery. Taste is irrelevant. The table went quiet. Rita gave the other human a look. Of course, the man said carefully. I just meant that humans are weird about food. We care about flavor even when we shouldn't. Flavor is a primitive evolutionary response, Trell explained. A crude system for identifying nutrition and avoiding poison. Advanced species have moved beyond such biological limitations. Moved beyond enjoying things. Rita asked softly. Trell didn't have a response to that. He returned to his notes. The next few days followed a similar pattern. Trell observed meals, documented everything, and retreated to his room with his nutrient paste. The humans didn't pressure him, but he noticed them watching. Waiting for something that on the fourth day, Rita invited him to the local market. If you want to understand human food culture, you need to see where it starts. The market overwhelmed Trell's senses. Stalls overflowed with produce in every color imaginable. Vendors called out prices. Humans squeezed fruits to test ripeness, smelled herbs, debated the merits of different varieties. It was loud and chaotic and completely inefficient. Why don't you just synthesize nutrition centrally? Trell asked. This system wastes incredible amounts of time and energy. Because it's not just about nutrition, Rita said, stopping a cheese vendor. It's about connection. Tradition. Joy. Joy is not a valid nutritional category, Trell replied. Rita purchased several items and they returned to the station. That evening, she offered him bread, cheese, and fruit. Simple items, she explained. Nothing threatening. Just taste them. For research, Trell refused. His nutrient paste was perfectly adequate. He didn't need to compromise his digestive system for research purposes. But that night, lying in his quarters, Trell couldn't stop thinking about the market. About the way humans touched their food before buying it. The way they smiled when describing flavors to each other. The energy in that chaotic place. His data wasn't capturing something. Something important. On the sixth day, disaster struck. Rita burst into his quarters with urgent news. The supply ship had been delayed by stellar anomalies. His nutrient-paste supplies had been contaminated during transport. The sterilization unit had failed. Everything was unusable. Trell stared at his ruined supplies. 3 months on Earth. 0 nutrition, paste remaining. Rita stood in the doorway, holding a basket of bread, cheese, and olive oil. Professor, she said gently, you have to eat something. Trell's eye stalks drooped. His entire body sagged. 20 years of research. 20 years of academic certainty. All of it built on the foundation of never compromising, never trying their food, never risking exposure to their primitive practices. He looked at Rita. At the basket. At the simple human food that his entire career had taught him to fear and despise. His stomach made a sound. A very unhappy, very empty sound. Just bread? He asked quietly, Rita smiled. Just bread. I promise. Trell sat at the small kitchen table while Rita prepared the bread. His four hands trembled slightly. This was insane. Professionally irresponsible. His colleagues would be horrified. The data clearly showed that alien digestive systems weren't designed for human food, but the data had never accounted for starvation. This is the simplest thing I can offer you, Rita said, placing a small plate in front of him. Fresh bread, olive oil, and just a tiny bit of salt. Nothing complicated, nothing dangerous. The bread was torn into bite-sized pieces. Pale yellow oil pooled on the plate with a few white crystals scattered across it. It looked harmless enough. Trell's analytical mind immediately began cataloging components. Simple carbohydrates, fatty acids, sodium chloride, nothing inherently toxic. How do I? Trell gestured awkwardly with one hand. Take the bread, dip in the oil, and just eat it, Rita demonstrated with her own piece. She made it look easy. Trell picked up the smallest piece of bread between two fingers. It was warm. He hadn't expected that. Warmth meant recent thermal processing. Cooking. The word felt strange even in his thoughts. He dipped the bread into the oil, watching the liquid soak into the porous structure. Whenever you're ready, Rita said. No pressure. Trell brought the bread to his mouth. His whole body tensed. This was the moment. The moment he crossed a line he'd spent 20 years standing behind. The moment he admitted that maybe, possibly, his research had been incomplete. He took a bite. The first thing that hit him was texture. The bread was soft and chewy, but with a crispy exterior that crackled slightly between his teeth. He'd never experienced food with multiple textures before. Nutrient paste was uniformly smooth. This was chaos in his mouth. Then came the taste. Trell froze. His eye stalks went rigid. Every analytical thought in his head stopped functioning because his entire nervous system was occupied with processing something it had never encountered before. The bread tasted like grain, but not just grain. There was something deeper, something about warmth and time and transformation. The olive oil was rich and smooth with hints of fruit and pepper. The salt made everything sharper, clearer, more present. It wasn't nutrition. It was experience. Professor. Rita's voice sounded distant. Are you okay? Trell swallowed. The food traveled down his throat, and he waited for the nausea, the rejection, the digestive rebellion his research had predicted. Nothing came, just a pleasant warmth settling into his stomach and an overwhelming desire for more. He started then stopped. He had no words. His entire vocabulary was built around describing food as fuel, as chemical compounds, as nutrition delivery systems. He had no language for what had just happened in his mouth. Good, Rita suggested, smiling. Complex, Trell said finally. The data doesn't capture this. Chemical analysis shows the components, but not the... He gestured helplessly with multiple hands. Not the experience of it. Rita pushed the plate closer. Try another piece. Trell did. Then another. And another. Each bite revealed new details. The bread had a subtle sweetness he hadn't noticed at first. The oil left a coating on his tongue that made everything feel richer. The salt didn't just add flavor. It made the other flavors stronger, more defined. This is what you do 3 times a day. Trell asked between bites. Every day. At minimum, Rita replied, though usually with more variety. Variety. Trell's mind raced. Different textures, different flavor combinations, different chemical interactions creating different experiential outcomes. Or, as we call it, different foods taste different, Rita said with gentle humor. Trell barely heard her. His scientific brain was recalibrating everything. Taste wasn't just a primitive poison detection system. It was a sophisticated sensory apparatus for gathering information about food, and humans had weaponized it, turned it into something complex and deliberately cultivated. What else? He asked suddenly. What else can I try? Rita's eyebrows rose. We should probably take this slow. Your digestive system needs time to adjust. But there's more? Different experiences? Thousands, Rita said. Tens of thousands, actually. Every culture on Earth developed their own cuisine. Different ingredients, different techniques, different flavor profiles. Trell's eye stalks swiveled excitedly. This was data. Real data. The kind that came from experience rather than analysis. I need to document this. I need to try more. For research purposes. For research purposes, Rita echoed, but she was smiling. Okay, but gradually. Tomorrow, I'll introduce you to tomatoes. Tomatoes, Trell repeated, accessing his database. Acidic fruit consumed as vegetable. Contains toxic compounds in leaves and stems. Considered safe only when fully ripe. That's one way to describe them, Rita said. Another way is to say they're sweet and tangy and perfect with fresh mozzarella and basil. Mozzarella, that's cheese. Fermented milk proteins. Trell's skin rippled with remembered disgust. Then he stopped himself. His disgust had been based on theory, on data analysis, on assumptions about what food should be. But the bread had been good, really good. What if he'd been wrong about other things too? Yes, tomorrow, Trell said firmly. I'll try the tomatoes and the cheese. For comprehensive research. Rita left. Of course. For research. That night, Trell lay in his quarters, staring at the ceiling. His stomach felt strange. Not sick exactly, just active. Processing. Working with real food instead of pre-digested paste. It was uncomfortable in a way he wasn't used to. But the bread. The bread had been extraordinary that he pulled up his research notes, the ones he'd been compiling for 20 years. Page after page of analysis about human food being primitive, dangerous, inefficient. He'd been so certain, so absolutely convinced that his chemical breakdowns told the complete story. They didn't. They couldn't. Because the story wasn't just about molecules and compounds. It was about the experience those molecules created when they combined in specific ways under specific conditions. Humans hadn't just survived their death world by eating everything available. They'd learned to transform raw ingredients into experiences. They'd made pleasure out of necessity. They'd turned survival into art. And Trell had missed all of it because he'd never been willing to take a single bite. His communication device chimed. A message from Dr. One. How is Earth treating you? Trell typed slowly. The bread is very good. A long pause, then, I'm glad you're learning. Trell set down the device. Learning. Yes, that's what this was. Real learning, the kind that came from doing rather than analyzing. The kind that challenged everything you thought you knew that he couldn't wait for the tomatoes. 2 weeks had passed since Trell's first bite of bread. Now he ate 3 meals a day with the station crew, documenting everything with obsessive detail. Every flavor, every texture, every unexpected combination that somehow worked. Rita had been true to her word, introducing new foods gradually. Tomatoes had been a revelation. Sweet and acidic simultaneously, impossible to fully predict from chemical analysis. Then came pasta with herbs, roasted vegetables with garlic, simple soups that tasted like concentrated comfort. But today was different. Today Rita was taking him into the nearby village. There's someone you should meet, she said as they walked down a narrow cobblestone street. Old buildings pressed close on either side, their stone walls warm in the afternoon sun. The air smelled like baking bread and growing herbs. They stopped at a small house with a garden overflowing with vegetables. An elderly human woman sat on the front step, snapping green beans into a bowl. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, but she looked up and smiled as they approached. Nana Rosa, Rita said. This is Professor Trell, the one I told you about. Rosa's eyes crinkled with amusement. She said something in Italian, then switched to Galactic Standard. So you're the one who thinks we're crazy for enjoying food? Trell's eye stalks drooped slightly. I'm revising my earlier conclusions. Good. Rosa stood with surprising agility for her age. Come, you haven't eaten real food until you've had a proper meal in someone's home. The kitchen was small and cluttered. Pots hung from hooks. Dried herbs dangled from beams. Jars of preserved vegetables lined shelves. It was the opposite of an efficient nutrition processing center, yet somehow it felt alive in a way those sterile facilities never had. Rosa moved through the space like water flowing around rocks. She pulled ingredients from various places, her hands working without conscious thought. A conversation flowed in Italian with Rita while she worked. Trell tried to document everything, but there was too much happening too fast. "What are you making?" he finally asked. "Food," Rosa replied simply. Then, seeing his frustration, "Ribollita, old bread soup, Tuscan specialty. Very simple. Very good. Simple." Trell was learning that when humans said simple, they meant something very different than what he'd thought. Rosa was sautéing onions, carrots, and celery in olive oil. The smell filled the kitchen. Then came canned tomatoes, beans, and vegetable broth. She added the old bread last, stirring it until it dissolved into thick porridge. "This is poverty food," Rosa explained, ladling the soup into bowls. "From when people had nothing. You use old bread that would be thrown away. Whatever vegetables you have, you make it work. You make it good." She set the bowl in front of Trell. It looked like nothing special, brown and thick, with bits of vegetable visible. But the smell was incredible. Layers upon layers of flavors combining, transforming, becoming something greater than their parts. Trell tasted it. His eye stalks shot straight up. The soup was warm and rich and deeply satisfying. The bread had absorbed all the other flavors while adding its own texture. The beans were creamy. The vegetables were soft, but still distinct. Every spoonful was slightly different, but equally good. "This is sophisticated," Trell said slowly. "This isn't primitive survival food. This is advanced biotechnology." Rosa laughed. "Biotechnology. I like that. My grandmother would have liked that too. But it is," Trell insisted, his mind racing. "You're using fermentation for the bread. Controlled thermal processing to break down cell walls and release complex sugars. Strategic application of aromatic compounds through herbs. The olive oil delivers fat-soluble nutrients and creates mouthfeel. This is engineering. This is cooking," Rita said gently. "No." Trell's four hands gestured excitedly. "You don't understand. My research was wrong. Completely wrong. Humans aren't primitive for cooking food. Cooking is advanced biological manipulation. You're pre-digesting complex molecules, making them easier to process. You're combining ingredients to create nutritional synergy. You're not just eating to survive. You're optimizing every meal for maximum benefit." Rosa refilled his bowl. "Eat more. Talk less." Trell obeyed, but his mind wouldn't stop. Everything was clicking into place. Earth was a death world. Humans had faced incredible survival pressure. And instead of developing stronger jaws or better raw food digestion like other species, they'd developed fire, tools, cooking. They'd changed their food, so they didn't have to change themselves as much. "Your planet tried to kill you," Trell said between bites. "So you learned to process it first, to break it down before it entered your body. You weaponized chemistry. We wanted to eat good food," Rosa corrected. "The rest just happened." But Trell saw the deeper truth. Humans had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. They were biologically fragile compared to other species. They couldn't eat most things raw. They needed their food cooked, processed, prepared. Any other species would have seen this as a limitation. Humans had seen it as an opportunity. They developed fermentation, extending food preservation for months or years. They created cooking methods that made tough plants edible. They combined ingredients in ways that increased nutritional value beyond the sum of their parts. They hadn't just survived on their death world. They'd mastered it through food. "I need to see more," Trell said urgently. "Different regions, different techniques. If every Earth culture developed their own cuisine, that means thousands of independent solutions to the same problem." "Not a problem," Rosa said. "A joy. Joy is a secondary benefit," Trell argued. "The primary innovation is the survival strategy." Rita and Rosa exchanged glances. Rosa said something in Italian that made Rita laugh. "What?" Trell demanded. "She says you think like a scientist," Rita translated. "But you're starting to eat like a human." Trell looked down at his empty bowl. He'd eaten all of it without thinking, without analyzing, without documenting. He just enjoyed it. "I need to contact the Institute," he said. "My research was fundamentally flawed. The entire galactic understanding of human food culture is wrong." "First, dessert," Rosa announced, pulling out a small cake. "Tiramisu." then you can overthrow scientific consensus. Trell wanted to protest. This was urgent, important, but the cake smelled like coffee and cocoa and something else he couldn't identify. And he was learning that human food was always worth trying. Just one bite. For research, one bite turned into the whole slice. Then another. By the time they left Rosa's house hours later, Trell had eaten more in one afternoon than in his previous 2 weeks combined, and he'd finally understood what it meant to be human. Trell requested an extension of his Earth assignment. Then another. 3 months became 6. 6 became 9. Rita arranged travel permits, and Trell began visiting other regions. Thailand taught him about balance. Sweet, sour, salty, and spicy in perfect harmony. One meal could contain all 4 flavors, each enhancing the others. The curries were lessons in complexity theory. The street food was chaos that somehow worked. Morocco showed him the power of spices. Humans had crossed deserts and oceans to trade for aromatic compounds that made food more interesting. Not necessary, not nutritionally essential, just interesting. They'd built entire trade routes around making food taste better. Mexico demonstrated innovation through limitation. When you only have corn, beans, and peppers, you learn every possible way to combine them. The result wasn't boring. It was brilliant. Tortillas, tamales, pozole mole. Hundreds of dishes from the same core ingredients. Japan revealed precision. Every ingredient placed with purpose. Every cut deliberate. Food as meditation, as art, as philosophy made edible. Every region told the same story. Humans had faced impossible odds and responded by making their food better. Not just safe, not just nutritious, better. They'd made survival delicious. Trell documented everything. His data files grew massive. Videos, chemical analyses, taste descriptions, cooking techniques, cultural context. He interviewed chefs and grandmothers and street vendors. He ate food from every continent, every tradition, every economic level. And then he wrote the paper. He took 3 weeks of constant work. Dr. Wen helped edit it, though she mostly just smiled and told him to trust his conclusions. Rita read it and said it sounded like he'd finally understood. Rosa, when he visited to read her section, simply nodded and said he was learning to see. The title was simple: Death World Adaptations, How Humanity Weaponized Their Own Nourishment. The abstract was revolutionary. Human food preparation is not primitive survival behavior, but rather sophisticated biological engineering that allowed a physically vulnerable species to dominate one of the galaxy's most hostile environments. What the scientific community has labeled as reckless consumption is actually the most successful evolutionary strategy in known history. He submitted it to the Galactic Journal of Xenobiology, the same journal that had published his earlier work condemning human food culture, the journal where he sat on the editorial board. The response was immediate and hostile. Professor Klein, his former mentor, sent a scathing message. Have you lost your mind? Or have the humans poisoned it? Your career is built on proving their dietary practices are dangerous. This paper destroys everything you've established. Other colleagues were less diplomatic, compromised by human contact, no longer objective, clearly suffering from some form of cultural contamination. The institute demanded he return immediately for psychological evaluation. His funding was suspended. His courses were reassigned. Students who'd once quoted his lectures now mocked him on social media. Trell sat in his quarters at the research station, reading message after angry message. His entire professional life was collapsing. 20 years of respect gone. His reputation destroyed. All because he dared to admit he was wrong. Rita found him staring at his blank communication screen. You okay? I've been dismissed from the editorial board, Trell said quietly. My research grants are under review. 3 universities have withdrawn speaking invitations. Professor Klein is writing a formal rebuttal to my paper, and he hasn't even read it yet. I'm sorry, Rita said, and meant it. The worst part is that they're not wrong to be angry, Trell continued. I spent 2 decades teaching students to fear and dismiss human food culture. I published papers establishing the scientific consensus that you were nutritionally primitive. How many other species avoided humans because of my work? How many opportunities for cultural exchange did I destroy? Rita sat down across from him. You were working with the information you had. Now you have better information. That's how science is supposed to work. But I had the information. Trell's eye stalks drooped. I just refused to look at it properly. I let my assumptions guide my conclusions instead of letting the data speak for itself. So what now? Rita asked. Trell was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled up his communication screen and began typing. What are you doing? Rita leaned forward to see. Inviting Professor Klein and the entire editorial board to Earth, Trell replied. If they won't read my paper, they can see the evidence firsthand. You think they'll come? They'll come, Trell said with certainty. Because I'm going to challenge them publicly. Academic pride won't let them refuse. He sent the message before he could reconsider. A formal invitation to a demonstration at the Tuscan Research Station. He would present his findings with live evidence. They would see what he'd seen, taste what he'd tasted, and if they still disagreed, at least he'd know he'd tried. Rita smiled. Rosa is going to love this. She's been wanting to cook for aliens since you told her about your colleagues. This could backfire completely, Trell warned. Some species can't process human food. Others will be offended by the entire premise. I might just be ending my career more thoroughly. Or, Rita said, you might change the entire galaxy's understanding of humanity. Trell looked at his communication screen. Already responses were coming in. Professor Klein accepted, his message dripping with condescension. Others followed. The editorial board. Rival researchers. Even some of his former students, now holding their own positions, they were coming to prove him wrong. To demonstrate that he'd been compromised. To salvage the reputation of xenobiology by publicly discrediting its former star researcher. Good, Trell thought. Let them come. Let them eat Rosa's ribollita and Thailand's green curry and Mexico's mole. Let them experience the layers of flavor in a properly aged cheese. Let them understand that taste isn't primitive. It's sophisticated that he had 2 months to prepare. 2 months to create a demonstration that would either revolutionize galactic understanding or completely destroy any remaining credibility he had. He contacted Rosa. She answered immediately, her face filling the screen. They're coming, Trell said. 15 of the galaxy's top xenobiologists. Can you cook for them? Rosa's smile was fierce. Can I cook? Oh my boy, we're going to change their world. Trell believed her, and that belief, built on bread and soup and countless shared meals, felt more solid than any academic theory he'd ever published. The real work was about to begin. The transport shuttles began arriving 3 days before the demonstration. Professor Klein came first, his silver scales glinting as he emerged into Tuscan sunlight. He barely acknowledged Trell, instead immediately setting up equipment to test air quality and contamination levels. Still don't trust Earth atmosphere? Rita asked, watching the display. Standard scientific precautions, Klein replied coldly. Unlike some, I maintain proper research protocols. The others arrived in clusters. 12 species, 15 academics, all carrying the same suspicious certainty that Trell had carried 9 months ago. They eyed the farmhouse with distrust. They pulled out their own nutrient supplies. They spoke in clusters, deliberately excluding Trell from their conversations. Doctor, when arrived last, her expression carefully neutral. Quite the turnout, she observed, standing beside Trell as they watched the gathering. They're here to destroy me professionally, Trell said. Perhaps, Dr. Wynn agreed. Or perhaps they're here to learn. Fear often looks like anger. The dining hall had been transformed. Rosa and a team of local cooks had been working for days. Long tables stretched across the space, set with simple plates and glasses. No fancy equipment. No molecular gastronomy. Just honest food, prepared with skill and care. Professor Klein surveyed the room with barely concealed disgust. This is your evidence? Primitive thermal processing and uncontrolled biological compounds. This is dinner, Trell replied simply. Please, everyone sit. The academics settled reluctantly. Several kept their nutrient paste containers visible, making their intention clear. They would observe. They would not participate. Rosa emerged from the kitchen, flanked by her team. She took in the gathering of aliens with calm assessment, then nodded once. The meal could begin. The first course was simple. Bruschetta, like Trell had eaten on his first day. Tomatoes, olive oil, garlic, basil, bread. Basic components. Fundamental flavors. This is the evidence, one researcher scoffed. Charred grain with decomposing plant matter? Try it, Trell said quietly. For science. Klein picked up a piece with obvious reluctance. His species could process human food, Trell knew, though they typically found it offensive to their refined palates. Klein bit carefully, chewed methodically, and swallowed. His scales rippled. Once, twice. His eyes widened slightly. Interesting, he admitted grudgingly. More complex than the chemical analysis suggested. Others tried their portions. Some couldn't process it and set it aside apologetically. But those who could eat human food went still, the same way Trell had that first day. The same way every person went still when they realized food could be more than fuel. The second course was pasta. Rosa's grandmother's recipe. Simple tomato sauce with fresh herbs, handmade noodles, sharp aged cheese grated on top. The smell filled the room as servers brought out steaming bowls. Klein didn't wait for permission this time. He tried the pasta and fell silent. Around the room, the mood was shifting. Conversations died as academics focused on their food. Data pads were set aside. Even the ones who'd brought nutrient paste left it unopened. The third course was ribollita, the soup that had changed Trell's understanding. Rosa explained its history as she served it. Poverty food. Leftovers transformed into something greater. Nothing wasted. Everything elevated that a Quillen researcher began to cry. This is comfort, she said, her scales shifting through colors of emotion. How is this comfort? It's just food. It's never just food, Rita said gently. That's what we've been trying to tell you. The courses kept coming. Roasted vegetables that tasted like earth and sun. Cheeses aged for years, their flavors concentrated and complex. Bread baked fresh that morning, still warm from the oven. Each dish told a story. Each flavor combination demonstrated principles that went far beyond simple nutrition. Professor Klein sat motionless after the fifth course, staring at his empty plate. The fermentation alone, he said slowly. The controlled bacterial cultures. The transformation of base compounds into complex flavor matrices. This is biological engineering at the molecular level. Yes, Trell said. And they do this 3 times a day? Every day, minimum. Klein's scales rippled again, showing emotion he rarely displayed. I've been wrong. We've all been wrong. He looked around the table at his colleagues. We saw primitive practices because we were looking for primitive practices. We missed the sophistication because it was hidden in the everyday. Dr. Wen caught Trell's eye from across the room and smiled. The final course was dessert. Multiple options from different Earth regions. Italian tiramisu, French tarts, Japanese mochi, Mexican flan, sweet endings from cultures that had developed independently, yet shared the same insight. Meals should conclude with JOY.AS, the academics aid. Rosa moved between tables, explaining techniques and traditions. She spoke simply, but her words carried weight. This was her inheritance, her grandmother's knowledge passed down through generations. Not written in textbooks, recorded in muscle memory and shared meals. Why? A researcher asked suddenly. Why do humans invest so much effort into something as basic as eating? Rosa considered the question carefully. Because eating is not basic. Eating is how we show love, how we celebrate, how we mourn, how we connect with our past and build our future. Food is memory made physical. The gathering fell silent. Around the table, academics from a dozen worlds sat surrounded by empty plates and full understanding. Professor Klein stood slowly. I owe you an apology, Trell. Your paper isn't wrong. It's revolutionary. Humans aren't primitive for cooking their food. They're advanced in ways we never imagined because we never bothered to look past our own assumptions. Others nodded agreement. The Quillen researcher was still crying softly, colors shifting across her scales. We need to completely revise our xenobiology curriculum, she said. Human food culture isn't a warning. It's a model. Rita leaned close to Trell. I think you just changed the galaxy. Trell watched his colleagues talk excitedly, making plans for new research, discussing applications for their own species. 9 months ago, they'd been enemies. Now, they were students, all of them learning together. Not me, Trell said quietly. Rosa changed the galaxy. I just wrote it down. Later, after the shuttles departed with full bellies and revolutionized thinking, Trell found Rosa in the kitchen. She was washing dishes, humming an old Italian song. They want Earth cuisine taught at the Institute, Trell told her. Cooking as advanced biotechnology. Your recipes in textbooks. Rosa laughed. My recipes are meant to be tasted, not analyzed. But if it helps them understand humans better, okay. Trell picked up a towel and began drying dishes. Simple work. Repetitive. But shared with someone who'd taught him more than any academic text ever could. Thank you, he said. For what? Cooking dinner. For showing me that being wrong can be the beginning of being right. Rosa patted his arm with a wet hand. You're learning. Now, come back tomorrow. I teach you to make pasta. From scratch. Trell smiled. He had a galaxy to educate about human food culture. But first, he had to learn to make proper noodles. Some things were worth taking time to do correctly.